Welcome back to Prime Time for Women, the show for and about women in their prime. It is my pleasure to introduce Milagros Phillips. Milagros is an author, teacher, presenter, and she also hosts a TV show called Race Healer TV. She's spent the last 25 years of her life teaching a program called Race Literacy to educational, political, and corporate leaders. Please welcome Milagros Phillips to the stage. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I know I didn't say, but you've written how many books?
3 books.
Okay, and
Yeah.
what are the titles of those books?
So the first one is 11 Reasons to Become Race Literate. The second one is 8 Essentials to a Race Conversation. And the third one is Speaking Race in Healthcare.
That's great. So Milagros has taken one of the most difficult topics of our time and turned it into an opportunity to learn, understand, and inspire and transform. And Milagros, you were saying when we were talking that this has been your life work to bring this to different formats, and here you are after you've been on TV and speaking to Congress. Tell us what brought you, why did you agree to be here with us in Hagerstown, Maryland today?
Well, for me, the issue of race is global. So I'll go anywhere that someone wants to have a conversation on race. And I'm so happy to be here with all of you. I'm grateful to Bernadette for inviting me. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with all of you. So hopefully you'll ask questions and participate, because it really does need to be a conversation. And it needs to be a conversation that's based on compassion and based on understanding. So I can talk a little bit more about why that is.
And I was going to ask you, can you tell us how this journey began for you? Was there a moment in your life when you said, this is what I'm going to do, this is my calling?
Actually, yes and no. So I got my calling I got my calling at birth, right? But I really, really got my calling the day that Dr. Martin Luther King died. And I was 14 years old. I locked myself in the bathroom to cry. And my father kept knocking on the door and saying, "You okay in there?" And I just kept saying yes. I didn't want him to know that I was in there crying. And I very distinctly felt that it was really important for me to do this work, for me to do race work. And at that point, I said, no, there's no way I'm going to do that. Somebody just got killed for doing that. So, no. I'm 14 years old. I'm thinking, there's no way. I fought it for the longest time. But I started to do diversity when I was an adult. And every time I did diversity, I would end up talking about race. Out of all the diversity issues that we have, that's one of the most difficult for organizations to have a conversation about, to talk about, or even to bring someone in. To this day, it's hard for them to bring someone in to talk specifically about race. We'll talk about gender issues, women's issues, LGBTQ issues. All of those issues are extremely important, and so is race.
Right.
But we don't always invite people into the organizations to have those conversations. So people stumble over those conversations all the time. They don't know what to do with them. They don't know where to take it. And even the people who want to do something, there are a lot of leaders that want to do something. A lot of them don't even know what to do. Mm-hmm. So my work is really helping people to become race literate so that they can find their own language. I mean, part of the problem with this issue of race in our country is we are a country that's obsessed with being the hero of the story. If we're not the hero of the story, we don't want to tell the story. And you can't find a solution to a problem until you realize that you are the problem.
Yeah, Milagros, I was just going to ask you, I did get a chance to watch your TED Talk presentation, and I would invite the audience here today and also in our viewing audience to check it out. But one of the things you said in there that really struck me, you said, in regards to race, silence is killing all of us. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. So we don't want to have these conversations because they are difficult conversations to have. And more often than not, they're difficult conversations to have because racism happens at a lot of different levels. There is the systemic level, there is the interpersonal level, there is the internalized level. We've all been raised under one umbrella, around the issue of race. We just absorbed it differently based on where we are in the caste system and what we have been assigned in that caste system. So very often people don't have enough information with which to have a good, coherent conversation where people don't end up feeling guilty or ashamed or angry, because most of us have not been educated to be race literate. Once you become race literate, it changes the conversation. The thing about that is that none of us is perfect. We're all going to make mistakes, and it's important to not silence your voice around this, because everyone's voice counts. For the most part, everyone has something to say about race. And it shows up, and when it shows up, it doesn't show up in the nicest of ways.
Okay.
So it's important to keep talking about it, to keep bringing it up, to know that we're not always going to get it right, but not to stay silent, because the silence is what's keeping the dysfunction in place. It's important for us to begin to have those
You have to
conversations.
shine the light on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and I was going to, I have other questions, but I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to engage you, the audience, and give you a chance not only to ask questions, but maybe to share your stories and to get Milagros' take on this. One of the things that Milagros talks about in her programs is not just identifying the problem, but that has to be the first step, but that once you identify the problem, there are steps that can be taken, and maybe you could have the opportunity to share some of those next steps.
Sure.
So, is there a question out there that anybody has?
So my main passion has been working with children and families, and I have also taught teachers. And I'm always looking for the best ways to help teachers, help children, and help families. I work with the youngest ones. So I know I'm going to read your books now, for sure. And I'm wondering, do you have recommendations for teachers who are working with the youngest children?
Sure, absolutely. So when you're working with young children, first of all, actually, I want to say this because there's a wonderful article that was written in the New York Times a long time ago, and it's called, "Is Your Baby Racist?" Okay, so I would suggest reading that for starters. But, so children come in with this sense of innocence, and we found out through research now that they also come in racialized. And so having conversations on race with young children is really important. Talking about the garden and how all the flowers in the garden come in a different color, and they're all beautiful, and they're all important. You know, things like that, where you can start having those conversations. Because the truth is, if you look at it from a broader perspective, nature loves diversity. It loves diversity. It does not make anything the same thing twice, okay? We are the ones that have a problem, and that problem is historical. And we now know through...
Is it also learned?
Yeah, it's absolutely learned, but what I want to say about that is, I'm so sorry, my ear is very pinned to my to my head, so my mic is a little bit off. But it's inherited and it's passed on, and we learn it from the people around us. The thing about that learning is that we now know from research that trauma gets passed on, and traumatized people traumatize others. And we now know through research that not only does trauma get passed on, but it gets passed on for 6 generations, not including the original traumatized generation, which is a full 7 generations. Okay. When it comes to abuse, physical, emotional, financial, all those things traumatize people. And so what happens is, if we don't have the awareness, we can't shift it. Once we have the awareness, though, we can look at life from a different perspective. We come up with new and creative ideas, and we look at, like Einstein said, you cannot solve, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically you can't solve your problems with the same mind that made it. Right. You need to think differently. And how we think differently around this topic is by becoming better educated around the topic.
And I saw a question in the back, right here.
I wonder, as I thought through race all of my life, if maybe it's not, if racism is at one level, but then differences, values, how you were brought up, circumstances, experiences, if that deeper level is what puts people apart as much, and it somehow or another has been labeled racism, or perhaps there are groups of people, whether white or yellow or black or whatever, that we suddenly say, I'm not enough like them, I become afraid. Is there a deeper level in your research that you have found, or is that really truly race in and of itself?
Right. So race has a very specific history. And it's that historical context that separates it from some of these other things like xenophobia, which is the fear of strangers. There are all kinds of fears that people have and all kinds of ways that we've found to separate ourselves from one another and othering people. Okay, they're the other, right? So there's a level at which that's natural to us, okay? And then imposed over that, you have the issue of race.
Right. Well,
So it's at a whole nother level. Absolutely.
Because most of us have, or at least I do, I have friends of all races, but I'm not friendly with everyone of every race. And I
Right.
think then, is it racism, or is it that deeper connection, those deeper values?
Right. And so, we tend to make friends right around where we are, right? We make friends at work, and we make friends with our neighbors, and so on and so forth. So if we have a country that is segregated, it still is, okay? And so you're going to more likely have more friends with the people who are around you. If we had less segregation, then you would probably have, friends of. But when it comes to this issue, particularly in this country, you have to be intentional.
and I would
You have to
say
be
that's part of the mission of Prime Time for Women. Right in our mission statement, we talk about bringing women together from diverse backgrounds to explore new possibilities and new opportunities. So at this time, we're just about ready to go to a commercial break. I just wanted to let you know 8 essentials to a race conversation and 11 reasons to become race literate. These are 2 of Milagros' 3 books. I hope that you'll take a look at these books. You can buy them at Amazon. And let's please give her a warm thank you for being here today. We'll be right back after this commercial break.